Hail, one IC's been sent.
Well, we are still waiting on a judge.
Sounds good.
Cole and I are good whenever.
Sweet. Is everyone good then? Cool. In that case, I'll get started. No stop in the next few seconds. For LNG approval process, swamp by 11 state vetoes and the Clean Water Act, the equation of new LNG pipeline and import export terminals, class of 16, federal state competent to height of the national gas pipeline settings for determination could benefit from earlier substantive equation of state interest for the proposed state government to the sideline federal environmental law provided state the point of entry rejection on the CDB way out of stuff for the 11th hour beat up point. This is the cost and efficient way of addressing these issues purchased out of the state environmental regulators to seem to provide the challenge to sit back without fully addressing environmental concern invited the 11th hour beat up point. The CDB permits listing this can produce sufficient receipts to court the point decision delays on the Clean Water Act specifically kill the LNG project. Duncan knows 19 time with full certification is crucial to energy and infrastructure projects. It is 30 kill project section 41 certificate of common cause to live with more pronounced citizens. Take a liberal view of the clock correctly. They didn't use time for review. Receive mixed messages for permit process. This is the key regulatory bottleneck prevents fish and LNG exports. Use 17 bottleneck not a notice time 30 projects and the first 19 at least number 20 pipeline project. Not easy build project regulatory state hurdle states must approve get resources where they needed. The pipeline project review hub is the bottleneck expanding LNG exports to keep the strength and needs to be told that's crisis gone for over 16 years. It's a major point for LNG China. Found that the world's largest importer of financial assets doubling increasing American LNG would enable China to accelerate the shift. U.S. gas might be the most cost competitive and reliable source. China could have been immensely from secure U.S. U.S. and China interests are allowed to hit the proposed airports lines claims to the water, Taiwan, Korea, the Chicago crisis, which included the war island building, such a competition, global interdependent cooperation, interdependent session, to avoid border separate regional rivalry, Chinese large any hidden manipulation, LNG trade with their relations by first cooperation, increasing Canada to find a solution to the regional crisis and even independent. Flashing point inevitably escalate now, miscalculation risk taking. Port Bazaar 21, intensifying graphically brought flashpoint Taiwan, China's emissions, going waste of conflict in Taiwan, alignment with the U.S. budget, increased threats, watch the manifest strategy, visit time, arms still lifting restrictions, bolstered ties, the stronger movement of war, rising fears, the possibility of taking aggravated competitors, dangers, avoiding war, not present other international view put in the way. Mass calculation, got the nuclear war. Kalaki 16, the U.S. and China are probably put us away from nuclear exchange. PRC will be possible to prosecute a major war without risking U.S. nuclear attack. The U.S. believes stopping the PRC may depend on the credible threat to use nuclear weapons, perception increased possibility of war, and the likelihood that it will use nuclear weapons used for the PRC that will risk escalation to prevent island information. Part of the number is all diplomatic badness, communication, misunderstanding, or poor judgment because conflict difficult to stop. War in Ukraine is financed to enable all European gas dependency. Yes, perception flow to heat and escalate the conflict. Level 36, Putin's war machine is fueled by oil and gas, able to get rid of domestic political change, but military war chest potentially 50% more conflict pro oil and gas. For service and revenue content of Russian aggression been connected to oil wealth invasion of Afghanistan, oil prices were skyrocketing. Putin gated Georgia, Russia annexed Crimea. Calculates are shaped by status of the petro state weeks before Putin's invasion. Russia's ministry announced a windfall that endured as a result of oil and gas. Oil prices, like which were calculation of oil prices would have crashed. Would be difficult for Putin to be facing crisis of domestic power with the coffer their flesh and view that we did with the gas of national exuberance behavior shaped by the cash from outside national borders. Russian gas revenue fund. Putin take away the oil revenue will be possible for the borders to be pat on the limiting our dependency is essential. Ukraine conflict escalates horizontally. Measure of success results in emboldened risk taking in the Baltics. Extinction. Hooker 421. Putin discount retaliation. Warning of a willingness to use the weapon nuclear access reactor very high rates. Russia little to do due to will begin assassination until within Russian capability to stabilize the Putin's credibility. So Putin will continue to escalate on Ukraine's border attack on NATO. Do that the way it establishes obtain a land quarter Baltic should find Russia. Should Russia find success by attack? Do that the international waters, Black Sea, NATO, and disarray and short escalation can become quite real. Hybrid operations, ethically Russian parts of NATO territory. If Putin initiates an excessive escalation, likely risk are subject to intimidation. Prevent Russia from escalating. Unity and concerting will be critical. Most effective way to prevent spillover is how to take the Russian forces in the field in Ukraine. If that's proven the perception of weakness provokes and resolve its potential controls the primary capacity of weaning Europe from energy closing markets, oil and natural gas can enable Putin to continue pretend on the persistence and resolve of denying natural financial resources. Independence on Russian LNG exacerbates the European energy crisis fractures the EU. Home to 21. European energy crisis lead direct season prices 5 times higher. Asia consumption cuts by third. Poland victim of grift on Europe. EU summit to address the crisis. Hardened division between states. Divergence of energy interest prices. Selling united for security difficult. Dependent on Russia was profitable. Consumer major driver conflict by factor 16 additional volume. The Russian gas undermine gold surviving to interest. Blocking unified agenda. Definition of European bargaining power. When the union state less secure by lottery rather than EU level. With division punishing states rewarding consumer alleviate crisis. Bolster European resilience. Russian long-term branches and European defensive cohesion is key to deter fixing deal. 404 culmination of militarized foe progressive rigidist NATO mission transition to a greater defense role in European partnership. Russia remain volatile. Must reconcile demand Ukraine and the flex support over the next year. The alteration continue beyond the war in Ukraine. The extent military took Russia, sidelining it more centralized and assuming continuous modernization after Georgia decisively resolved conflict lead on brutal hypersonic vehicle and conventional conflict. Fundamental element increasing the adversarial stance to worldly perceived Russia as threat and evidence of takeover in the deeper branches of the sacrifice the state pre-tech Russia elderly threatened Germany's fleet. UK partners have created more located a larger European role to strengthen the flank, integrate non-US ambition, more robust defensive mission because the result EU and central serious coordinated movements from European states threats of nuclear use beyond Ukraine beyond serious concerns, serious multiple security crises down the line across multiple domains. Belarusian, Polish, Baltic, Russia sanctioning nuclear forces indicate growing more unpredictable. It could lead to a full military development of NATO stabilization, but not materials for several years. Prepare for a long confrontation. Externally, energy prices winter, energy price crisis winters the EU. POP 21 with the energy crisis having contributed to inflation. The issue dominates the Euro group. Escalating price crisis will be the focus. Price concerns, conference and EU recovery. South and East countries demands support, but this is unlikely. Energy composing crucial area. The crisis has turned EU debates from carbon to Russia, finance and spending. Poor countries suffer the brunt. This how the trust between countries. EU fracturing causes global confidence, collective trade, natural growth to break down a multilateral extinction about for 19 in the real world. EU unique access to the economy and multilateral promote norms of the public good. To put back attached to the faces of the hostile environment, but remains best to pursue human rights and the rule of law, generate resilience to a partner, push back against priority. Europe should leverage assets into co-op conflict mediation and open trade assets that you can work towards. Europe need to think about global sustainability, engaging a common good. The plans: the United States federal government should substantially increase its protection of water resources in the United States by requiring that the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission balance natural and state environmental, non-environmental concerns and liquefied natural gas infrastructure approval projects under the Clean Water Act. Federalism. For exclusive authority causes federal states refuse over environmental impact. Cost 17. Exclusive federal jurisdiction will take away the meaningful role that the states can play and the ability of state officials to ensure that new facilities not cited with compose a danger. Congress stated with federal LNG do not convey federal eminent domain authority and reserves and right to the states and the CWA states to begin to use the federally delegated authority under Clean Water Act to block infrastructure count LNG terminal plan fosters federal state cooperation, the hybrid energy governance, effectively just the environmental impacts of LNG, to cease water pollution, causing Russia 16 hybrid governance supports the energy infrastructure show enormous project many interstate energy project passive elusive invent from states to focus on veto points over project pipeline process that only consider limited concern. Court state regulators a group to take away and see approved the mechanism the impact of veto points, the comprehensive information about the impact of energy projects determined to reduce federalism, conflict, reduce carbon benefits, recognition for federal regulators, the benefits and harm, encourage more collaboration between states regarding impact of carbon pooling when you're developing far superior developers, though that benefits must be taken seriously. More into projects that have less significant environmental impact. Specifically, a state role in LNG sitting in state great security and energy innovation. There remain 6. LNG because of the providing an environment safe for supports responsible development. State one structural strength should not abuse market power for decision improve capital investment. LNG reaches supply. It has the potential to frustrate energy efficiency, job long-term benefits, $31 billion energy efficient technology, worse rejection of fossil fuel states, giving meaningful right to agreement, state legislative or responsive laboratory making progress to improvement climate change renewables, portfolio, long comprehensive energy security, energy independence, and enhance if given a greater role in the LNG process. Regulating LNG infrastructure is key to be climate goals by 2021 to achieve decarbonization, investing more in natural gas pipelines, help reduce emissions more quickly, preparing infrastructure for zero carbon fuels, feature set at least 30 years, the next 30 years with zero targets, no quick replacement, eventual replacement, not zero gas, carbon gas. We're building a new costly process for adjusting could minimize the cost of different investment, get support a pathway, lowering the cost of transition, curbing emission causes leakage, depending on existing regulatory authority to allow for state level reduction targets. Climate change causes can turn the impact to cause they predict so the possible. Beer 21, climate change puts a reversible loss, independently resilient each impact, tipping point trigger feedback loop, stable coalition, assisted recovery, water societies, open and fragility, the amplified shock, fast integrity as primary repercussions, death, power, produce health, between catastrophe, harm, food, common, change of economic condition, increased past disease, whether events and supply chain, anyone could come to unlimited food, with disrupting food, create conflict, state failure, after the nuclear war with the global political system and security, increased probability, crisis to escalate, false alarms, mistaken cascading failures, but effect, good vulnerability, risk, cascading collapse. 15, little flexibility, and many points of failure that can result in collapse, large weak vulnerability, attack with associated impact, multi insulation, attack with terrorist, lower property, cyber increase dramatically, regrets of said hair vulnerabilities are known, chuck rational, tip for 12, attack you set on the great canal, on the military, control, good attack, let's war, attack, region, attack, the war, met by false military, might include nuclear weapons, solvency. Weighing state to be prior to issuing approvals, key to streamline sitting process, classy road 16 for continuing improvement with older determination, pending state regulatory additional decision law for debate writing on committed information, conventional points, less state regulators to withhold assessment, research and no preemption of state laws, device state regulators make routing for information, conflict with federal proceeding, lead delineation that can lay the final result, required of verdict toward the court consolidated record with good decisions of state agency seem not require record, but not in the agency will make decision on that record for tribute benefit from knowing the position of regulator when this benefit for disagreement for TKPA input before the agency more effective protecting state interests to reach out to conflict. RB10, the state complained that the federal government's preemptive authority failed to give credence to state concern when the interest not protected. He was mentioned that delay permitting process, the primary impediment dominant delay at the state level, and the fundamental issues how to resolve the pressure attaining. Her will continue to be uncertain, complex, time consuming, and costly. See by key focal point. Duncan Ellis 19. Congress up the ballot oversight by permitting authority over water quality for natural gas over authority can forward attention pipeline pipe becomes involved for the state to the common for the TC by section 4.1. This authority established pocket certification became a focal point for opposition groups. Cool. Across.
Great. The plan text, I don't really get how this would be implemented. What does the F do?
Sure. So FERC right now, when establishing pipelines, they do not listen to state regulators. That means by being shut out of the process at the last minute, states veto the pipelines and they say they can't be used. Our evidence says that by considering...
So just to be clear, can states veto any pipeline?
States can use 401 permitting to veto LNG pipeline approval.
So all states can veto. So if a pipeline is going through a single state, the state can veto that pipeline in the SCRO?
Yes, in their state.
Okay.
Our argument is we solve that by having FERC requiring FERC to consider state environmental interests. What your evidence say is the reason why.
What does that mean?
So right now, the state's regulators say you're at environmental problems with these pipelines. Federal government ignores them, so the states block the pipelines in the last minute, so they can't be used. We consider them on the front end, which we think result in held up pipelines, having states rescinding their vetoes, and also future pipelines being allowed to go forward environmentally.
So to be clear, it's the same protections, just done by different people?
No. So state regulators say these are the environmental protections that should be applied to pipelines. Right now, the federal government ignores it. The plan would have require them to meet those pipelines for the states.
So
we think that means pipelines go through.
Okay. Are all those standards environmental?
Yeah.
What evidence says they're vetoing mass vetoes now?
Like the entire one I see, all the Class and Rossi evidence.
Just like what? Can you give an example of like a recent veto?
The Hughes 17 evidence says that there are currently 20 pipelines that are almost done being built and 30 pipelines that have been built that have been.
Wait, if they're being built, doesn't mean they weren't vetoed?
What? No, because that's the whole point. So the pipelines are built in the first place. 11th hour vetoes means right before they get put into use, the states veto their use because they weren't consulted, they have environmental impact, etc. So these pipelines are done, but they can't be used. We think the states would rescind their vetoes in a world in which their interests are now considered.
Okay. Does the Fed have to? You say consider the interest. Does the Fed have to? Is it like binding considering their interest or no?
We would say that they don't have to consider literally every state requirement, but they would be binding to meet the floors for water quality standards here. So so
water quality standards is binding on the Fed now. State standards are now binding on the Fed.
Correct.
Okay. Why does that spill over to other areas besides FERC?
Are asking about federalism or advantage one?
Yeah.
On federalism, we think that incorporating state regulators is critical towards developing more hybrid models that our Zimmerman and Klaus and Robbie essence says integral towards broader grid security. It's not just like a normal federalism is good warrant, but the hybrid federalism warrant says that like regulators in these areas are the same regulators that result in things like building pipelines that could be used for zero carbon fuels in the future, results in climate.
Okay, why spill over to like the grid though?
It says that incorporating state regulators is key towards this broader method of ensuring better grid sustainability, et cetera.
Okay, just to be clear, are there other environmental standards that the states could veto permits over?
I'm sorry. They're not an environment. I'm confused. What do you mean?
Right now, you said the states can veto if like if a pipeline does not meet their water standards, right?
Yeah.
What are there other standards that they could veto because
there are other methods of inhibiting pipelines, but they would not use that if they meet clean water standards.
Okay, but do you fiat affecting those?
There are other things like biodiversity prevention standards that wouldn't be like explicitly.
But is that the AF?
They're not impacted by the app, but they wouldn't use it because Clean Water Act is the focal point.
Okay.
All right. It's sent. 7 off advantage 1, then 2. Have people gotten it?
I got it. Give me a sec to get it open.
Okay.
I have it, but my antivirus is getting mad at me. 1 sec.
Okay, just let me know when you're good.
Okay, I'm
Sick. Anyone not ready? Cool. Good chance of legislation that solves competitiveness and innovation now. For the Cookies 4-7. Biden said important to pass compete. Good chance of passing. Agenda may seem stock president could be on the verge of sitting even to accomplish more likely than non-address big economic problems, boost innovation capacity. The planters a political firestorm consuming Biden's DC constant under 818. Biden doesn't navigate the politics of water. How should be how much should be set aside for protection against the industry instead of issue short circle political firestorm. He's a loser, whatever do very controversial with someone. Tech innovation solves every existential threat. Cumulative extinction events outweigh magazine. Quadrillion the future people prevent extinction. Broader approach generally how to keep civilization running, go to be better society, make side of progress, harness innovators. Next off, protects pursuant to Article 5 of the Constitution. At least 2/3 of the states should call a limited constitutional convention, and at least 3/4 of the states should ratify a constitutional amendment that substantially increases protection of water resources in the United States by requiring that the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission balance the national and state environmental non-environmental concerns in liquefied natural gas infrastructure under the Clean approval under the Clean Water Act. Solves the environmental measures that gets model simian 6. Environment will not be addressed in international effort. U.S. has significant influence on the world stage. Ability to start revolutionary process by enacting constitutionally guaranteed environmental rights in the entire world. Next off, increase means to make greater. Webster's 9 to become progressively greater in size. As in size, amount, number, intensity, protection means shielding from harm by regulating use of water, assisting for management, conservation, restoration, or mitigation. Circum 10 protect means safe shield from loss to structure ready to regulate or prevent pollution uses from protecting the resource place to maintain, develop, or restore, maintain, keep it service abandoned, protect, refers to regulation of uses they violate. They don't shield it from external harm. The ad is backwards. They decrease protection in the water by making it easier to export LNG. If they increase protection, but the dishes are voting issue for limits and ground. They justify authorities water use on or change water management, which applies the topic is which multiplies the topic into numerous minute areas. Unified topic mechanisms is key to all generic sense. They link to one type of action. Next off, the app buys into false hope of managerial some Western truth that insists the solution to failures of human intervention is more intervention. Quarter 9. Mana, Julie approach forget that the Jews are possibly the standard reserve all is here for human use. During faith in the managerial agreements and components like pollution, extinction, license, failure to manage PGs or failure to manage, we can avoid it. This media refusal to hear the real message. Humans not going to control, but like to do nothing. Anything else going into the environmental collapse and nuclear devastation. Quarter 9. In a day with predictions speak God could be expanded without restraint, such of disastrous resource management within human power to destroy all life with pauses is to find some way to manage our problems and take technological fakes, new solutions, disrupt chemical, delicate systems, even further doing more dangerous scale of disaster followed by a new intervention followed by a new disaster becomes society managers result nuclear devastation, disaster, environmental catastrophe. Next off, text the 50 states and subnational entities of the and run all relevant subnational entities should David insert the counter plan tax. The United States federal judiciary on Commerce Clause grounds should rule federal water protection unconstitutional, involving water resource protection. States solves better and sets the federal and sets the states or federal restoration other for decentralizing environmental policy address critical problems that the state further reforms, transferring a significant authority to state policy and policy innovation and generate attractive towards concerns along for policy variation of environmental controls matched by the durable courts key to broader federal survival self-extinction halakis 19 inequality terrorism competition symptoms mostly address risk permanent fails cause failing of governance federal system is unbalanced power concentrated away from people has created a highly unbalanced system polarization led to the inability to address the systemic failures will never get lasting institutions need to return power back to states otherwise dysfunction will only get worse. So it's done two better given 16 who will need competence. The U.S. can restore states by the Fed and push their own competences for state action movement. The movement is 100 times stronger and already California will lead if Harris could cover America there. This could set the same with the world. This would undermine the denialism and international state important nations to continue progress. States lead on the common demonstrate the world to the world that their actions mean winning lose the common movement. The world literally hangs the balance. Take it state by state to win.
I put it in chat or Discorded it to you.
Okay. The text is the 50 states and the 50 state governments and relevant subnational actors should increase the protection of water resources affected by LNG pipelines in the United States. The United States federal judiciary on Commerce Clause grounds should rule federal water protection unconstitutional on T or next off. It is exclusive. The plan must solely apply to federal jurisdiction. Legal interpretation. Red 10. It is possesses that means particular agreements and not any agreement they violate. They increase protection in court with states as best as extra T, which is an independent voter for limits and ground. Key generic state federalism, EVA federalism. States are dependent on federal protection. Increase not the federal government passing protected to someone else, which was the topic next off. Text. The United States federal government should negotiate new multiple link hotline that communicates through text receive only modes, linking the United States National Security Council directly to the Chinese National Security Council. Induce European allies to expand cooperation. Establish a program to cover 4.8% of the Earth of the surface of the Earth's oceans and a mile layer of 0.1 diameter latex particles, a bearing federal stabilization system, and that is an activated in salt water and appreciate with cyberclass by models and the grain, increasing the network visibility, increasing information sharing with private sector on it, and everybody across the major turns on effect one. No China, Taiwan, Turkey, and Culture 13. It is still there within the U.S. infrastructure. Taiwan, she will continue policy and with influence with the chase, political shoving and real future arms. Still China's policymakers are pragmatic enough to know that this can only be achieved through the long term. Taiwan aspects to significant. Also, Taiwan has been able to strike balance between U.S. and China. No U.S. China war times 17. Stupid law still makes accidental war on like in neither regard the others in and will just now possible to fight lagging not such as for conflict leader which have less considered mystery crisis leaders diffuse escalation in the U.S. leader leading every dimension of power economic independence possible nuclear fight which has competition for maritime has tend to be less lethal zero chance for Russian. Okay. Concede U.S. exports collapse without the plan that ensures Europe will cut off Russian oil and gas. Petra et al. 22 exports Russian power operations for Russia. The U.S. ban is less significant than European ban would be. Social political pressures will mount to put an embargo on Russian energy and cheese and Jews near a breaking point without Russian gas. The main challenge will be to refill its short. That will require working in the U.S. Largest exporter should help to ensure that exports go to Europe. European oil and gas exports of the last hope for avoiding economic collapse and lash out. Skidelsky 318 oil and gas from 18 lifeline state to give a path for war without nuclear weapons overseas. Threat as means of survival fights. Sanctions not yet threaten the survival of boom never guard cut off as energy as existential causes extinction, gay power war, and loose news security. 22. Ask how much economic devastation you want to inflict upon a country with nuclear warheads. Some Russian official be selling off nuclear materials and publishing largest stockpile of nuclear weapons. Feels like trouble we need. We need a defang Russia that with the last Russia has interfered with this long slugfest. EU fails and NATO fails to solve any impacts. Article 16. Europe and such nations they would be preferable to the traditional and inflexible and unpopular EU of today managing the prices on their own. The youth architecture created without a body. One consequence of this has been the rise of a aim to restore the national autonomy by appealing far right populism and xenophobic sentiments. The EU is increasingly a source of instability, exploitation, and to resolve conflicts among members. The EU suffers from structural democratic deficit. Countries will continue to form alliances based on common interests as the union dissolves the needs and its function of maintaining stability and deterring external threats will increase. The only security alliance is backed up by force has less capable of protecting its former Europe will be able to meet its most pressing security challenges only when around the fantasy of continental unity versus geopolitical pluralism and advantage two partisanship is an all cause Republican states will never cooperate with Biden. Obviously doesn't solve this advantage. No reason one instance of incorporating states means they solve it broadly and comments not because scientific consensus control on a gene high likelihood of humans like and misrepresents support and particularly likely worst case scenario if dialogue comes down to to analysis of volatile life conclusion human civilization will just false misrepresents sounds unhelpful and necessary process takes a long time exceptional essentially the personal speculation rather than clear conclusion drawn from rigorous assessment. No good clubs decentralization salts and good is really no impact into massive lack of 12 perceived agility is not robust good attack level huge amounts of facility built in grid has proven west power outer mitigated policy that restore quickly grid is officer regularly does not collapse does not collapse national security not affected by U.S. military is not created cyber wars hype uncomfortable files themselves algorithmic inequality
Well, there's not enough time to finish the turn. You don't have to read it.
Okay. Go for cross-X.
All right. Did you send the point text out for the counterpoint? The one that
Email and in chat. It's in both.
chat? Sweet, thanks. Cool.
And
Right,
email,
first?
yeah.
All right. First, status of the off.
Status quo is always the logical option.
Net benefits to devolution and the advantage counterpoint.
Devolution, the net benefit is the internal net benefit. Anything else, David?
Just internal advantage counter plan. It's the turn.
Okay, cool. And then wait, so what was the last card you read on case, just to be sure?
The cyber defense.
Cool, next. On the counterplan devolution, what does devolving this issue result? How does devolving this one issue result in the broader revitalization of federalism?
Yeah, the Adler card talks about how decentralizing environmental policy specifically, so that it literally has lines, sow the seeds for further reform.
How does decentralizing one environmental policy be the equivalent of decentralizing all environmental policy as per what that's card talking about?
It's not talking about like all environmental policy. It talks about how planting the seed of sort of transferring authority down to states allows for further innovation in that area and allows for more attention to local concerns.
Okay. The key violations, I first want to ask about am I correct in saying that this violation is the argument that the plan would be states enforcing it, or is it something else?
Yeah, but generally the federalism advantage and sort of using states to sort of shape federal policy we think is non-topical.
Why, if the federal government is the only actor in the plan, why does whether or not the states like the plan matter?
It's not a question of whether or not states like the plan. It's a question of like, do you increase state protection? And we think you do.
I guess that brings me to the question about the other key violation. what is the argument for why it's not an increase?
Yeah, so a few things. One, like right now, you made the argument that like they're getting vetoed. You reduce that, so you allow for more pollution and more pipelines to be used. And the second is that even if you don't do that, like even if you like, this sort of dovetails with the state stuff, but like if states still have the same requirements and veto all of these pipelines, then you obviously don't increase them because states are just still determining.
Okay, I
environmental
guess the
policy.
first portion of that, it seems to be premised on the idea that the topic is like, you cannot make more pipelines. Why does it matter if there are more pipelines if those pipelines no longer pollute water?
I mean, we think. Go ahead, David.
Well, okay. The way I understand it, and this could be me misunderstanding the AF, the protections exist in the status quo. It's a question of who does them. If they're the same protections, just now the federal government is also considering them, there's no increase in protection. It's just the same amount done by different people.
Okay, we'll explain it differently then. I mean, we'll explain not differently, but it is. But I guess. Okay, I think we should be good. We have like 10 seconds of cross, then we'll take a bit of break. All right, we'll start prep proper. 10 minutes. All right, we're stopping prep. 154 used. We're sending out the 2AC.
Right, email chain. Okay, I'm sending it out. All right. Does everyone have it? Let me look at the Zoom. Okay, looks like everyone says yes. The order is going to be advantage 1, advantage 2, T protection, T its, the advantage counterplan, devolution, managerialism, politics. I'm going to start in 5 seconds. Yes, China war opposed returns to
Hey, hang on. Hey, stop. I think Clark, I don't think your audio is working. But Clark was signaling not ready.
Oh, okay, that's my bad.
It's okay.
I don't know if
Yeah, order one more time.
Advantage 1, advantage 2, T protection, T its, the advantage counterplan, the devolution counterplan, the K, the politics DA. Okay. Now is everyone ready?
Oh shit! Sorry, I think I got prep. All right, sorry. Stop prep. 10 seconds. Same talk.
Okay. We're not dropping con. It's going to be at the bottom.
Jared, are you going to send cards? Is it no cards, or will you send those?
Probably no cards. There might be one. I'll send in the middle of the speech if there is, but probably not. Sorry.
That was about to be real embarrassing. Okay. Hopefully I can start now. Yes, China war opposed deterrence are in Taiwan and has lost of ambiguity and military maneuvers in the Straits. Plans also improve U.S. China pipelines, increase in interdependence, increase the cost of economy massively. That's one to see gone for. Their defense says it'll happen if China is interdependent. Yes, U.S. draw and China is using expansion of its advantageous likely escape matter incidents in the sea to full-scale combat, especially in the context of a Taiwan invasion, which is our internal link scenario. Their evidence doesn't seem to increase smooth calculation ambiguity in our evidence. The turn at the top. Yes, Russia won the score. They dropped this. Ukraine confidence financed by European oil buys. Russian says the Ukraine ensures horizontal escalation, but who view NATO intervention as inevitable and strike Narva in the Baltics order through NATO to Israel, which activates Article 5 goes nuclear. Plan saws removing European defense or Russian gas to increase LNG exports. It hollows out Putin's war chest and military, which uses oil revenues and drives escalation. Asks for the evidence of testosterone using military mission as inevitable. No Russia lash out. I want to see evidence specifically answers this. Russia will only lash out if they perceive that they're winning in Ukraine and need to strike at NATO to help and hope to disorganize it to stop it in intervention. Russia isn't going to sell nukes. We are in total economic class. We solve for Russia's war chest. Our level of hyperspace that stops Putin from gaining massive troop supplies, but it's insufficient to cause total Russian economic or state collapse. Also, selling nukes is not sufficient. There's no impact with their evidence as Russia would have long conventional war and not go nuclear, which comparatively minor. And first part about selling nukes makes no sense because Russia's isn't going to go bankrupt. Yes, EU scenario, US some question now proven by Le Pen and Slovakian prime ministers being defeated. Election yesterday shows it's possible by increased governance is possible by stopping Russian gas agreements, which destroys it. Advantage 2. No partisanship. Republican governors aren't vetoing right now. A spillover, we don't have to win. It's hybrid energy governance is directly impacted by our plan because it gives state regulators a voice and ability to cooperate in this exact area, which is hybrid energy governance. Yes, warming impact, high chance of escalation, adaptation to defense. Talking about the temperature effects of warming, not the escalating crisis and shocks that overwhelm human research that cause massive nuclear resource wars in the interim. Yes, grid collapse or defenses is possible. What attacks happen was hybrid energy governance sauce for innovative federal solutions would insulate the grid from systemic takedown efforts, which goes nuclear because the U.S. receives it as a direct military attack on soil. Key protection. We meet the protect squad research from adverse effects of LNG facility expands further consideration by requiring them to rescale LNG. It's true the plan results in more pipelines, but none of those pipelines will pollute water. There's a misunderstanding of the plan. States have standards they recommend right now, but the Fed ignores them, and because of preemption, the states can actually enforce those standards on pipelines. We require the federal government to meet those standards, which is guaranteed increase in protection, because right now the standards are literally not being followed. So change it by everyone AC card. We increase, we win protection. Proves that we increase protection, and we meet protection. They read our 2 AC card. We steal from injury. We meet again. If we meet the interim, well, we probably meet this as well. We meet with the only one implementing practices the Fed. They get recommendations from the state, but 0% of the plan are enforced by state governments. Prefer purely federal jurisdiction. Pipelines are federal, and states have veto to see the way. The person enforcing this is the DOJ. Is the DOJ. And FERC, which means they could read a different process deficits to like federal government against our plan. New contextualization means your responses. Advantage counterplan. Permutation do both. They're not mutually exclusive. Permutation to Calvin's way the plan could be done. Permutation do all combinations of the planks. Links to net benefit super controversial because it has to go down through the federal government. It can't solve net zero. Want to see hydrogen fuel and it's key to transition. Micro scale. Okay, 111. Increase the length of the ocean water. I can't believe I moved heat ocean machine real common federal hash water consider water holds more CO2 moisture oceanification. All lens increase escalation risk getting DS21. Ice communication lower words like moderate protected. Say, well, I don't want to reduce accuracy to not be here. Strategically pursuing actually reducing what present plan is not fully utilized. All cause inconsistent messaging. 21. U.S. relationship with customer and be never send be stop content track to the head of community at the same time. No contextualization of a great sustainability. Ready solve advocate will respond. Increasing cooperation solves nothing. Fracturing the medical price space in Europe. No definition of using cooperation has no meaning. I know Nick Fiat. It's not topical. No should not in the resolution protect counts infinite crowds of substance because we'll just spend our all the time on perms and theory. And condos border. One reciprocity. We can't go straight to advocacy. They can go straight to this. Second clash. They'll take the half and make it into which wrecks advocacy skills. This was always with the condition of straight turning. And topical counterplans are voting uses. T-lock down, which kills fairness and topic education. We would never get to the core question of the resolution. The evolution counterplan. Perm to the plan. Perm to the plan. Perm to the plan. It's a way. What? Like, this is our plan. Perm digitally devolve or something else. Perm to the counter plan. Cost by deficit. Immediacy states that develop separate regimes. What impact occurs in the meantime. Certainty key. Internally critical LNG's ability to predict what new permits are issued. State implementation of fall due to deficits or wench in the gears that undermines future vision. That's cost. Additional layers of review and crucial lifting complexity. Comment 19. Investment return to compensate for speed of quality we cancel uncertainty decrease or more as we have maintained the level of reviews and investment higher return associated with managed to create a level of certainty spend reviews and energy promise on not pursuing our producers took the older resource new England source to import from Russia supplement for reply members. Delegations impossible. Even if authority for pipelines provided, states don't have eminent domain rights, means they literally can't build pipelines without federal authority. Reject evolution counterplans. They destroy Afghan because they can't garner Fed key warrants when jurisdiction is simply transferred. That destroys research classroom and dread the team to deter future investment. Doesn't decentralize all environmental policy. No reason to spill over the key. Net benefit external doesn't solve the counterplan. There's not much about causes. There's no reason the counterplan would solve. Managerialism can. The role of the ballot is value of desirable topical candidates competitive alternative status quo. The debate shown the resolution is the only predictable point of stages with key and fairness ways with the only impact of outcomes solved. Permutation to both. Permutation to the plan with lens of the all and permutation to the all to way the plan can be done. Util is good for them. Use most good for the most people. Only ethical for them that can be developed to prioritize certain lives or others, which involves in the massive lives. No land plan is not managerial. Sorry, pipeline pollution is not attempting to terraform their evidence and turn doing nothing and focus on ontology leads to a company for idle days of technology. Davison 1. I find unacceptable disjunction. We go on intellectual testimony, but a second, so I do estimate to teacher drawn from the conversation safe personal life into large travel, everything is into tyranny. Everybody the rank of ecosystem, the discussion nature is not actually where we need to life, which caution not headlong into action. Artists took on the hidden wide different which still is liberal. I consider fairly large on let's go horrible. We actually will be could one strong line message like fire paid my dice control. Versus the last which long range media release him. Our ontological grasp technology. I think that perfect on his voter over to reading our best knowledge with interactions directed to the team. And everything calculated thoughts politically federal. We're 16. Actually skip that card, I'll come back to it if I have time. They can't solve the external invasion of Russia and after gas production increase, which requires managerialism. U.S. Perm to both shields because it's perm to both shields because it's received as follow on permanent account plan is a way to make it out so it's really federal permanent planning through context instead of blow and links and net benefit column has to call and improve causes fights and it's incoherent cannot apply a constitutional amendment because that requires further shift internal interpretation. Obviously circumvention occurs leads for agency interpretation delay matters in context and short-term impacts only plan immediately thought February 97 then the center was average time vacation time was 1 year 8 months and 7 days cost by process deficits and evolution counterplan all apply unprecedented nature event rather investors mean they want to be sure about investment related certainties for legal challenges during runaway stress international also start down Reachburg 18 there's something to contribution we expanded and ready to make special interest of the constitution make borders and the rules and termination we can responsible about legal issues on this legislative order with authorities hold the suits opening parts of chaos and predictably laws that threaten democracy and surety and there's no good possible application limited content is voting issue fiat that effect key wants specified abuse only after fiat and use it now before utilize mechanism which does a literature controversy reject the team back to USSDA. USSC fails despite bipartisan support. And only votes with 2007, day 420. USSC is now in conference committee. The supply chain chapter feels widely different versions. United States have a version with close and some loophole possible term was good as a bogus Senate version of the law has another type of votes as anyone get has to go lead to companies that not surround conference law despite bipartisan support. It would just win when it builds future policy. I'm 410. About issue for the cyber being also ways that are responsible with MSA, for example, orders on guns. We see that by particularly leaving use when you've had says like pandemic relief action can't be more time infrastructure and jobs small step on news learn from the LFR and LBJ. Everyone wants more pipelines. Are not 47. I don't know request like go government so much more low prices had to mature same for US for democratic oil guns and the prices more lowering increased production now reporters more fossil production companies to their part away from production markets started coming around includes fact new possible infrastructure will come working thing blocks for gas management pathologisation unless you get confession with gas those of who mentioned talks to Robbie Biden part of the Randy Will administration sure oil and gas policy make more palatable should move vote on he wants Biden to make us related to gas drilling mentioned lots of fish for regulations hates go Biden policy don't 11 mentioned the burning point overseeing for COVID stop pipeline he do his damn job to go first and the next final Biden all commission has names not last all parties to go forward and focus and say he was holding guidance domestic energy production is popular. However, 317. No polling data shows 73.3% American voters see ownership week increasing energy production variability. Americans want to see TRS high action increase. Inflation failure economy voters want. Americans are better American produce energy. Jared, do you have that like Terra defense?
No, just go back and read the card on the. Okay.
No, that's a good point. Back to managerialism, I guess. Rejecting Calculus thought is politically fatal. Which 16 is very terms of acting as a mindfulness between value openness and false ideas, moves and different human value best sense of why say never solve about personal motivation, depending on critical human knowledge of time value best you to an argument with the environment to last economy and flourish of course nature you to environment leases are ultimately when sufficient time highest use of confidence admitting we will sometimes predict smoothly value humans not mean they're the same as can go the same makes powerful kind of moral aesthetic sensibilities. On the term, they did not read an impact card. When they read one, we'll get new answers.
The con block is sent. It's on a Word doc and it has all the analytics.
You good for cross checks?
Yeah.
Okay. I want to talk about this Joselo 324 card. I understand the plan creates more pipelines. I guess why is that the same as gas drilling?
Well, it's broadly about Manchin wanting a better gas policy because of, he's, really crazy concerned about gas prices, and increased pipelines allow more exports of gas from production facilities. It says quote all of the above approach to energy policy.
I think it's important to frame it to the piece of evidence below it, which says that Manchin's actively tearing into FERC because of the fact that there are so many pipelines that are being vetoed, they're being blocked, they're not going through, et cetera, and says that they have to go through and that they should quote unquote do its damn job, which means that increasing gasoline exports, solving inflation, these would be things that Manchin broadly supports.
Yeah, I want to talk about the federalism sort of advantage on case. I understand that you sort of incorporate state feedback in this one instance. Why does that spill over to sort of broader cooperative federalism?
So 2 things. A, we don't think we have to win a spillover warrant because all our impact scenarios are about hybrid energy governance, in that allowing regulators to have their input on pipelines themselves is better because it's A, it's key for the grid, and B, allows for adaptation of things like zero carbon pipelines, things like reducing methane emissions from pipelines, which are critical to stopping warming. So we don't really need to win a spillover claim.
Okay, gotcha. I guess what would cooperation do to solve the grid? What tech would be developed? What action would occur?
Our evidence, or when I see evidence, indicates that broad cooperation with regards to energy security, especially in terms of export terminals and generation of power around pipeline facilities, is critical to grid security and innovation.
Okay.
I mean, I can't list specific tech in our when I see evidence. I don't think.
Okay, fair. Devolution, Coleman card. The counter plan gives all layers of review to the states and devolves that authority. Why do we create additional layers of review?
You create additional layers of review because you have the Supreme Court make a constitutional ruling about the federal water protection being unconstitutional, which means everyone's going to go to court and try to delineate the contours of that ruling. So
your Coleman
evidence.
Your Coleman evidence is about investors being scared of reviewing certain projects.
Yeah. So
why
after
is
your
that
plan,
ruling?
there's going to have to be a review where someone's going to say, "Hey, the Supreme Court made a ruling, but we think the federal government still has area over this for X, Y, Z reasons." Because
also it's not even just that, but also the fact that by devolving it to the 50 states, it's gone from FERC, who's been in charge of this process for 50 years. Suddenly the court says they have no more power. You have to go to each of the individual states for whether the pipeline can be in that state. Talk about the individual process within these states.
But haven't you read evidence that states are vetoing pipelines now and they have to do the review in the status quo?
What's the question?
Wait, but haven't you read evidence that states are reviewing pipelines and vetoing them now?
Well, it says states veto pipelines because right now they're not being considered environmental considerations. But just beyond that, this deficit is contextual to the unprecedented nature and how investors would be reasonably shook by the fact that the Supreme Court unprecedentedly rules their agency in charge of this whole process is now gone. Now 50 different states.
If you some of out of this, that probably just proves theory.
All right. 10. Starting. 423. That's in chat. I'm sending. Quarters, twin-C cards. Sent. Everybody good for an order while we wait. Okay. Advantage counter plan. The K. Con counter plan. T protection. Advantage 1, advantage 2. Let me know when people have the, wait, I can't get Zoom. Okay. Let me know when people have the doc and are good. Button's good. Gun, are y'all good?
I have the doc. I don't have it open. Give me 1 second.
Okay.
Cool. I'm good. Thanks.
Clark, you good? Okay, great. The counter tells better than the app. They have no type of keyword for any of their impacts. Government investment alternative means that solvency is more effective and avoids the net benefit. View the debates use efficiently. If you solve enough the app, you'll need a 1% risk in net benefit. A judge kick it after the loss of the perm links in net benefit because it still attacks Ukraine. It still leads to the Ukraine term because it still triggers decreases exports. What the counter does not do. Even they win some risk of shielding. They need a substantial deficit for that to way to link perm to the counter plan. The counter does none of the app and none of the topic. It's a perm to the counter severs, which is a perm for France education. The perm to the planks. There's no explanation for this is anything different from do both. If they explain it, I get new answers. I will concede links to net benefit, which takes out the politics straight turn. If I go for this counter plan, which does not link to it, they made the argument. They probably shouldn't have, but they did. Also, we in cross we said it wasn't a net benefit. Complete solvency debates. First is tidal fuel infrastructure key. I have no idea what this is contextualized to or why this is key to anything. If we win, that micro bubble solve, and that means we solve warming, even if there's not because they reflect sunlight. It's not a key to lowering emissions because even if emissions go up, we're still able to solve by just reflecting more light than is coming in. The kind of like completely solves Morgan 11. 2 million numbers using materials and energy clean tech machine technology powers injecting chemicals or energy waters unless the the state don't need to unless it is based on every system already in place only one variant. So what is got better satellite will not just hold the watch should be global range fully outside really powerful scientifically valid. Evan 10. We know she ended up under his service will be appears to have advantages built on existing natural processes simply cause effect easy no control most environmentally forgetting to increase the complexity of ocean. Surge ball versus the low the wind speeds the ton of hotline stuff. One this just the hotline stuff. If we win say yes, it's definitely they mean say solves first. It's China hotline solves and they say yes. Paid for team. The different let's go one presidential 2 NCS 3 text receive only present. Talks to the data employment crisis situation. NCS is a critical importantly higher grade between the civilian military has been the failure of the council coordinates authority text only reducing miscommunication and multiple links to ensure delivery until limiting signaling only NCS is not hotline. The rest would only be perceived. This minimizes perception benefits data communication early stage officials that to the interest of second match upon management. Their evidence on your specific kind of hotline. The evidence I just read explains it, and it's in the text. Kind of solves relations more. 19. Washington Beijing agreed to introduce an escalator world looking for a possible agreement in a conflict where the agreement limbs on both sides could fall more where the Beijing mini the commitment to liberalization of Congress. China hawks and their cage. Washington Beijing need to offer for the terror for that. Two countries need to build this 3-speed relationship like global economics. There's no competition. The name US and Chinese interest in there. We can limit the different terrorists and work extra development on weapons system and trade to other actors will be just preventing the use of diplomacy. Many work has replied China's security council generates party support. It means they don't weaponize it. It's out for team. The council according to the apparatus of the government has a new law to strengthen the role of communication and establish a unified system among the bars and bridges situations manner of the CSN. The legitimate of the party broad support for crisis management due to L15. The growing support for management support after the result of diplomacy violates and counters what is changed to the threat assessment. The modernization means the PLA will lead to the standard of police strategy for crisis negotiation costs. There are no internal opposition talks are acceptable. There's a reason to be optimistic benefits relate to projecting ability to negotiate. The grid stuff it definitely solves. One they say we did not contextualize it. Yes, the 3Ds evidence is specifically contextualized inside the grid. It builds. There's reason it builds the resilience, etc. Here's evidence that does contextualize it. Prevents grid intrusions. Plus GN and Solmier 16. Defense detection returns quickly identifying authority intrusion. The clear posture for limiting our Russian behavior, minimize intrusion. Definition focus on sophisticated threats, replacing legacy system, all the ways of modernization of the infrastructure, increases info sharing with the private sector, and lead the widespread effort to decide for must be retaliate across the window turns and indicates there will be consequences. We get connect fiat and it gets cooperation means nothing. Yes, it does. One, they consider we fiat, we induce it, which means even if it does not mean much, it's still going to do it. It leads to broad trust and the relations down the line. Now we get conditional neg fiat. We get specifically the amount we did. One is neg flex, CGS, the multiple angles, choose real world policymakers, consider multiple strategies for someone to solve for something. 3 is adds these skills, it makes it better. Using dividends and methods to advocate for something. 4 is high buys, there's tons of applicant, no neglect on the tech, but negative little guy they get. 5 is when conditions are used with the apps of idea. 6 is that choice and buy it solved. They know the weeks of the app can overadapt to bid is going to kick in the better classes because especially because they have less speech. 7 is arbitrariness, they're to infinite type theory in terms of maybe do it a little better. We need neg fiat. The topics are all getting worse and worse for the negative, and only that and kind of can solve it. Dispo does not solve. Nobody knows what it means. We would just add planks that force them to perm. Every theory they say skewed. It's a nebula. We use short T and DHLs instead. They say clash. They still be their best offense. Things like straight turning in this round prove that topical is a voter. None of this is topical. Okay. Concede perm not going for it. Perf con is answered by condo because blah blah blah. Con concede perm not going for it. T. I'm extending this very quickly because I don't think they understand the violation. Our argument is not that they decrease protection, but they maintain that they maintain the level in the status quo. Now, the fact that Jared said across, oh, we're going to re-explain it kind of proves their strategy on the T debate. In the status quo, or in the 1AC, they said right now states have total authority to veto and can veto anything. They just make the Fed follow those standards ahead of time before they veto, which means post-plan, they're the exact same standards as in the status quo. It does not matter if they're followed earlier or that the federal government knows they'll have to follow them because they end up following them. So what is the co-difference in the terms of the level of protection in between the status quo and the plan? Yes, who does the protection is different, but the level is not the same. We're not saying decrease. If they don't have to win, they don't increase. They must win. They do increase it. Now they say it's recommended and not followed. This cross-checks are very explicit. They can veto anything, so it's not a recommendation, which proves that there's a little amount of binding protection the same. They say we meet if they win an increase. No protection is the same standard. It's the same standard, so there's not an increase. They say they meet because they shield. That does not mean the increase definition, which is what we're going for. Yes, if they win the increase, they meet, but they don't increase. Turn at the top. The turnout ways, fast Russian economic collapse holds a Putin to lash out, guarantees great power drawing, and causes nuclear escalation. They probably should have read impact defense. Collapse means the low-level officials fell off loose nukes. It causes extinction. Right 7. Here's a middle loose nukes. Would make us oversharing that the states could fall into control of radicals with nukes. So they go to provide the nuclear Armageddon scenario picture, but also have an illusion of power. Then could form a planetary death fall the catalyst of terrorism. And turns case, it's the only scenario for NATO involvement. Stand 3-8. And that's the Russian military risk of striking Russia for naked aerospace for the risk of interference in NATO Russian engagement with nuclear escalation. Be possible to 2020 nuclear rockets, specifically Russia will consider receiving nuclear weapons and nuclear power as every face. Regime plots of the Russia may consider nuclear use of economic pressure issue. But they probably should have read cards of this. First, they say we consider war in the status quo. No, they didn't. One is their evidence agrees. Putin lashed out 1 week. Hooker for 21. Escalating the conflict beyond Ukraine's borders and the nearest option. Putin could consider if his survival is at stake and Ukraine conflict won't escalate now. NATO won't intervene. Draws yet 22. NATO will plan to work on the conflict line to make sure there's no conflict for the Russian invasion. NATO is not part of the conflict. NATO's defense. We won't go over the avoiding total state glass and who is crucial to prevent nuclear lash and escalation. Watch 3-3. Russian oligarchs and companies already know the president's over Liz and Putin is still living ahead of a nuclear war dependent away on the West with Sullivan providing an extra strategy for Putin that fails. Well, somewhere avoiding the Switzerland and Russia, which could bring about unprecedented scenarios involving nuclear strikes. Only avoiding total economic devastation can enable the pathway to de-escalation. Goldberg 317. Mobilization will also because of the broader world into Russia's important energy markets and brighter energy will not end the conflict. Russia needs to face saving way out of miscalculation, good escalation, finding some conflict. We see possible negotiations is the only way to wait a long-term success or the entire region. The representation of trades convenient way for the government to elect attention for real problems. This was in the 1C because our evidence says the only scenario for last year they said he goes because they said the plan stalls because it removes its defenses. No evidence says that makes him more emboldened. This is all the evidence we read. They read no cards on what makes Putin lash out or not lash out, especially because the one they read that they think is good. We recall they say it helps Putin's war chest. It does not matter because he'd be desperate. Yes, even if he has more money now, he will not use it to lash out because we can offer him and offer him out. They say no lash out. When you see the answers that I answered above, they say Russia won't sell nukes. They have no evidence for this. We read cards. They have no other option. There's a country with 4,500 nukes. If they thought they're going to lose political power and economic stability, they would sell them to save the economy and to save face. They say there's no impact line nukes. I read a card. If they want to read one, I guess, but they probably should have read the 2C. They say the card. They say the card doesn't say we make them bankrupt. Yes, but they have made an internal link, but then we read a card that says it's cost of the economy. Now, the rest of the escalating sanctions backfire. Stand 3-8. This is going to hurt the leaders of escalating sanctions. Not about oppression. Military based on choice use of remaining military below church and ban the fight sanctions. May affect the political domestic calculus of sanctions. Very severe losses among the oligarchs or of rewards. Now the advantage proper. First, the U.S. China war stuff. I'm not going to read evidence on Taiwan, but there's no Taiwan scenario which answers the terminal. There's evidence that does not assume that there's no miscalculation in the status quo because we're both rational. Either way, no China war, MED, interdependence, American lead, no preparation, nor consideration for conflicts instead of to de-escalate and history proves maritime major less violent. That's Thompson. No wars. 2017. Combined deterrence and independence mean there can be no wars long as both apply the combination may be sufficient. Each lens calculate security and high economic risk assuming both have an effect to symbolize the risk of them going to war. Geodemographic combination of enormous population huge. Power protection for trading provides peace. The miscalculation term does not make sense. Why is gas key? And also, who miscalculates? Why would one side risk using a nuclear weapon if they think it's better to avoid war in the first place? The extinction stuff on the flow. Oh, the EU stuff. No, all they say is Le Pen proves the impact. I have no idea why that's the case. It may be proves the EU is strong now, but does not prove they're able to solve global issues when they cooperate. I mean, EU is terminally unsustainable. Right, 17. And the EU sentiment is more worse than ever. The root of her flaws in the massacre framework of them. There will always be risk of members will against will bring down the entire project. The central issue is democracy advantage. No impact from warring taping points. Or first, no impact from warring taping points. Or scientifically disproven the curve. And it says even 10 degrees would not be existential. Their models are bad. Pyro 19. Large chance of using because modeling results in modeling the projection. A method of modeling should be bad. Pro genetic degrees not really cause collapse on the analysis. Climate change. The ability of people like features interchangeable. Climate change is survivable. Climate change won't kill us all. Their evidence assumes taping points are true, but our evidence says that is not. Consensus of the grid collapse is not escalating. They does not assume nuclear attack because we consider it one. Yes, it does. One is we would not nuke attack because the grid gets up really fast. Section 18. Whose electric is not but good at density. Hackers can block out good groups and not density capabilities. Good civil the second no target. Not operational numbers. Not was block operation. Not likely ask yourself why the U.S. responds with nukes if the grid just went down for a few hours, even hacked out, just come back in hours. So it's interviewing 17. How can there be bad good cyber security? Give it a little reliability. So the version of the U.S. goes down good at moving away from the computers, working the infrastructure to get it back. That is marked after get it back. I'm good.
Okay. I want to start with like the topicality. So tell me if you're getting this wrong. Your argument is that like there's no increase in protection because if pipelines violate state standards now, they'll just get vetoed.
The standards that exist post-plan are the exact same standards as exist pre-plan. It's just a question of where they are, but that does not matter.
Okay, but okay, sure, fine.
And 1AC
Russia,
cross-ex was like said they're binding. So you
sure.
can't go further.
Russia, the Russia turn. What piece of evidence says that allowing Europe to wean itself off Russian gas causes Russian state collapse?
The 1C evidence. I can pull it up if you want the author name. Give me a moment. Case. The Skidelsky evidence, quote, oil and gas will remain the country's lifeline. With nuclear weapons, if the power perceives a threat to its means of survival, it will fight. Sanctions do not yet threaten their survival, but Putin may regard a cutoff of energy as an existential threat.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
I guess like Russia, like selling nukes, if it's low-level officials selling nukes, I'm again confused as to how like anyone would even think that helps like the Russian economy or anything.
So our argument is twofold. One is that people are scared about losing power. And so like, okay, I need an income stream or a way to gain leverage. And so they would sell nukes for that. Two is because the Russian economy would be spiraling downwards. Even high-level officials would consider being like, we need some way to generate money or we're going to lose all semblance of control. So we will sell nukes just for the money so we can use that. And you like, I think asserted we didn't read an impact, but you did not answer. You said, won't sell nukes if we solve his war chest, but that doesn't really make sense.
Yeah, all right, sure. The hotlines, actually, like the big advantage counter plan.
Yeah.
Like, so like you have the USFG. Okay, the net benefit is just the turn.
Just the turn. You said links to net benefit in politics. We never said politics to net benefit. Continue.
Fair enough. I guess warming, like, I guess like I don't understand like your impact defense in response to like what I said in the 2AC. Why is temperature the only thing that's like relevant here? Because like your Piper evidence is just like 10 degrees isn't going to kill everyone.
So the Kerr evidence, I mean, that really simplifies the Piper evidence. Both Kerr and Piper answer the warrant, the warming card you read, actually one I hadn't seen before, but the warrants are just positive feedback loops. We've read two cards that say positive feedback loops are not vetted in scientific literature and are overwhelmed by negative. And even if they were to happen, the Piper evidence is saying, let's assume positive feedbacks were true and we accelerate it up to 10 degrees. Even that would not cause extinction.
Okay, sure. The sand card, like, where does this say that Putin escalates?
Wait, sorry, I have the 1C instead of the 2C open. Let me get them back up. The sand card.
Yeah.
Literally says a desperate Russian might risk striking Russian aid, congested airspace furthers the risk of NATO Russian
what?
aid. It says
maybe,
a desperate Russia.
There's two sand cards, and I'm looking at the wrong one because
I'm reading the one under war, under the top, under the overview.
Okay, it's fine.
It's sent. The order is politics and then the Lopez counterplan. Devolution. Have people gotten it? Yep. Anyone not ready? Okay. On politics, what is wrong? One, all our PC evidence adds since the prices and the cost of legislative victories. Two, here's evidence of hyper specificity of the current political climate. In Garrison 21, it's only government for basketball hard wide individual legislative when the idea that legislative win because the subsequent legislative when the environment is wildly asking for too much fast one piece from court to pathetic kills landmark legislation far from it. And three, here empiric species look at one, here empiric starboard. 18, research to love Congress are not into the White House needs priorities legislation throughout the decide how much PC to spend on an issue. Congress is a drink for the whole water down, he'll throw it up, start to clear to down the lines. Well, I don't know the Europeans the White House did not define priorities, got lost in numerous battles, minefields. Well, hold a shotgun approach, addressing money is possibly to go. Can chaos for even if they win winners choose not offensive to the also win uniqueness and they have to win winners win because the plan being popular on its own doesn't mean that the use that you see is popular. The Lopez kind of plan, the kind of plan solves the after involves authority of water protection to the stage which zeros any solves the deficit. They also don't assume broader core only on the covered clause which is key to effective protection. That's Adler. It also solves broader federal governance. Water is unique issue that spills over that outweighs one scale bottom up regulatory innovations key to adapt to ossified international structure
to evolving existential threats by 22. Technically, for disasters, combat to nuclear war, controlling these, or would have to move guard rules we needed evasions, but not of their own. Also needed institutions upon state and local governments to respond to pressure public and advocacy if individuals need limits on invasion that lead to nuclear war control, AI, gene drops, all self extension institution needs institutions need strengthening market card after strengthening that also proves that also solves the terminal impact that the trade turn on the disset 2 magnitude 2 AC can that battles in the decline ensures US evolves it as into populist authoritarianism causes national wars and extinction or 18 pessimism possible in the US would be dark nationalist wars escalating to global nuclear conflict tornado style military robots and climate disasters new fashion risks global climate catastrophes outweighs on magnitude and probability by millions. You can mark that as an analytic and turns cases quantify the cards I would above and the evidence from the one and C key to solve the climate key to solve the environment more broadly and climate specifically also turns war because uncorporate federalism key is more effective at solving it through the base sufficiency if you solve enough the avalanche 1% risk of a net benefit judge kick the kind of plan after the round if we lost it 2AC1 term if the plan fails our internal benefits predicated off the sole authority of being good the aftershocks of fostering cooperative framework and sets and get the federal government more involved 2AC2 1 didn't read a proper firm text don't give it to them 2 just another textual nor functional competition is neither textually nor functionally it's both textually and functionally intrinsic 3 defining water laws key the CWA's key battlefield for federalism Robert 15 federal consideration remain very is critical as excessive change of growth within federal regime everyone to test regard the various tenets of federalism policy we need no better battlefield that the environment policy which represents federal policy powerful federal interest by strike opposite by interest local application of law the carry on the federalism and federal line the key innovation very carefully start co-op federalism and the clean water giving you responsible to this is evolving limited intrinsicness is better one the abuse expands beyond the plan near infinite combination justifies later abstraction getting out of the self to this and time frame firms 2 ground way which is always the way opportunity cost regards to the only kind of plan type the negative 3 opportunity is self-serving and made up no resolution or predictable basis the 2AC3 the power perm do the kind of plan savers 1 federal government states OED 89 public unity distinction several energies 2 it's not it's a single meaning federal only upgrade 91, nothing single possessive is not there. Implication of the US and DC single, not the 50 states total sense. That's what a friend segregation still essentially suffice half condo and 2AC4 don't cause myself to deficits. They must contextualize them to the kind of plan. 2AC5, but DC never said which one of the impacts are coming now and how soon they happen. The kind of plan have to fast know if they do more explanation. We get new answer. 2AC6 certainty isn't key. Their cost evidence. So the kind of plan, so the kind of plan is uncertain. Don't say the kind of plan is uncertain, and investors aren't investing now because they have a fractured regulatory regime. The kind of plan solves the better either way. See the kind of plan solves certainty. The kind of plan key to political stability and social order. Marie 16, the declaration of federalism, the weak condition underlying the country's political illness, the shifting of its mediation. DC is undermined the system to self-organized peacefully. The U.S. chaos. They close up the question of survival. Their Coleman evidence doesn't spill up, doesn't create new layers, creates last. They try to spin it as cross-ex as companies would be surprised. Not where their Coleman evidence says delegation does solve the kind of plan, gives all states all federal authority, all authority over water policy means the Fed can't circumvent construction of pipelines. The kind of plan is good. 1, their term is arbitrary, ensure shifting theoretical growth, but that only include what the neg happens red. 2, counter term neg gets kind of plans with state and federal actor and Elam's not arbitrary data proving Elam specific outside panels on this topic line to do outside of Elam rents with 54.54% of the time for neg ground division of the topic means you can choose between courts and any immunity of agencies or Congress from shoehorning the anti environmental forum causes after would makes it debating possible for the negative 5 topic education lowest key debates about topic education from Gardner 5 present conference clause regular water politics meaningful federal policy weather protections vast and political states and federal policies when federal preferable to state control they have ground because they can be fed key or devolution key and protect the argument not the team and yes decentralization is good caused by all the work I did in the overview they have conceded a straight turn to the advocates it turns the federalism scenario the kind of plan spills over the federal and yes spills over the kind of plan spills over the federalism large Kevin and all 16 the anti-competitive argument will also have separate review revocation for and policy federal state cooperation involvement regulation useful because states have greater development more enforcement officers but federal governments indefinitely impose on states that would threaten corporate federalism with far-reaching effects.
Right. We have 7:56. I'll start it now. Step prep, 420 rating. So I got a card. It'll be in the body if it's cool with y'all. Oh, actually 2 cards to the body though. They're set. Let me know when people get it and I'll give an order.
Got it.
Cool. Order is advantage 1, advantage 2, T protection, or the violation they extended, the advantage counterplan, then the Lopez counterplan. Cool. People good? 1 second. Okay. I see Cole wants a second, so I'll give it a minute. Cool. Jeff, you're good. Cool. Cole, you good? Sweet. I think everyone's good. No stops. I'm going to get started.
Concede that there are 50 pipelines already built that can't be used because the states are state veto. They're blocking usage, which is one of the huge evidence plan reverse causally solved to prove that we have a unique warrant for solving immediate defense, which is the thesis of the affirmative, the China theory. I'll do it first. Cooperative reverse causal hotspots escalated go nuclear now from mismatch perception and bolderistic in the SES in China means that China LNG is capable of solving this reverse causally because it means that China would not be willing to go to war but to cooperate with their primary energy supply because otherwise the people will run out of food. They say economic independence. This is not a warrant for why not. Our evidence says even if economic independence has large, it's not true for things like yes, etc. because China believes that economic independence restrains the U.S. as well, which means that they do not think that the U.S. will be willing to use their force, but the U.S. think they have to have credible their force, which credibly deter China, which means that conflict unique will likely unity dependent solve this because people go to the table. China has a structural incentive to not be able to willing to go to war. They not be willing to go to war. I'll go to the second advantage here. This is the Ukraine scenario. We are extending both impact. It's the most short-term scenario. Putin winning in Ukraine causes attempted national power seizures in the Baltics because he bases foreign policy and oil prices, which is proven by both Ukraine and Georgia, which means that results in NATO drawing in war. You should frame this through the defense they did in the 2NC. They spent a ton of time extending their own offense, but very little time doing defense throughout scenario, which means that there can only be a risk of the affirmative offense being true. Their only defense here is the one piece of card that says that NATO is not part of the conflict. They're not part of it now, but the hooker evidence is a scenario where Putin actively invades the Baltics, which because it needed to be a goal because it will be an expansion of the scope of the conflict, which makes it uniquely likely for a draw. This is the only defense they read, but they don't get any response, which means that likely war is likely uniquely now because NATO would get drawn in the case where NATO countries were uniquely threatened and resulted in violence on NATO territory writ large. Hooker's reverse causal saying that cutting off gas, Russian gas solved this. It's a question of the US being able to decrease oil prices, not sufficient to destroy the Russian economy, which no evidence says, but rather sufficient to reduce the war chest of their ability. Hooker does not make the claim that it would happen while Russia's a collapse, which is what their internal links are predicated on, but rather says that Putin would be restrained in the world of oil price collapse because he no longer has the funding for a chest. However, in past years, the world oil price decline, it did not result in Russia selling nuclear weapons, which would dump all the stuff on the thesis table. However, they've also dropped the second Russia impact on the advantage, which is the fixed evidence. It said that there was a structural unique disclaim that long-term Russia will inevitably attack a fractured Europe, but they do not win themselves off of Russian gas. Winning case means that this should be a full risk of an impact because of the fact that Russia's has been co-opted by the military, which means that they have an incentive to do things like revanchism in the East, etc., which means that only a strong Europe can solve this. They've dropped the internal link saying that Europe can be severely solve this by solely getting them off of Russian gas because it results in unity, which would be sufficient to solve this impact. Which that we have the only risk of external Russian impact. Russia does not sell nukes. This is a predicate of the internal link of a total economic collapse. They have no evidence for. Their evidence is terrible. The sand evidence says that if there's total collapse, perhaps it would occur, but it makes no predictive evidence. The other piece of evidence isn't even about Russia, not uniquely likely. And they did not read a terminal impact of nuclear terror, the 1NC, which is what the 2AC was saying. They said Russia might sell nukes, but did not say nuclear terror causes war, causes extinction, or any other impact. No nuclear or retail. Macintosh story 18. Even in the remote capable access requires a nuke and primary 6 casualties. Other WDs are more appealing. CBRWs are easier over time to produce and procure like a nuclear attack. CBRW that are more credible, can precipitate and follow up with a single attack by hardening the resolve time on aims and such the build with risk of discovery and terror. Unlike the exchange top research program to engage in risky effort with devil prospect that nuclear taboo and effect on public support nuclear effect their own dynamic that can be devised in this way. The organization of West financier will be monitored and that scope will be deep. I'll go to the T stuff here. Cross-examination with misspeaking, obviously not the characterization, cross-examination, and the thesis of the one I see proves that the affirmative does. We meet, we've explained that there's a floor for engagement to listen to states for the most stringent water quality standards. They can listen to more stuff, but there's a floor for engagement as for the what I see solvency evidence because the states already have recommendations. They just aren't being implemented. That's the minimum and prove that we meet the increase interpretation. If we do any increase in water protection, we solve this. And our evidence says that the pipelines are still getting constructed now and they still have environmental damage, just not having oil flow through them because they lost second vetoes. We still require them to meet those environmental standards, which is an increase in water protection, which is the bar for the team interpretation. No standards detected, meaning that's not a reason to direct the team. Don't get them new articulation in the next speech. On the advantage kind of plan, permanent both. No, not sending permanent both. The China hotline stuff doesn't solve. Say yes does not matter if we win the hot weather. Actively bad. 2NC evidence says that cooperation,
agreeing to the hotline makes conflict more likely because because it reduces the incentives for de-escalation. They might be right that the 2 and C evidence make the claim that cooperation is going to occur in areas like AI, terrorism, etc., but they do not share the same interest in the SCS scenario, which is what their 2 and C evidence is about. Deuce evidence says that makes miscalc more likely because it makes China think that they can de-escalate intervention to make them be more important to risk taking, which is the entire thesis of the miscalc advantage, which has no defense to in the previous speech, the Lopez kind of plan. The internal net benefit here is a joke. If the Robbins evidence says devolving water is key to evolution writ large, it does not make the claim that one specific case of pipeline authority would be sufficient to solve devolution writ large, nor is there any impact that substantiates the claim. They should have a high threshold for winning on this when we have deficits to the counterplan. Also conceded the internally defense advantage too, and also we said in cross-examination, i.e. the plan does not spill over to broad federalism, rather applies to regulators, meaning there's not a link turn or any cooperative federalism offense apply here. None of it applies because of the fact that we do not straight develop the broad federalism, rather only apply to through regulators, which doesn't apply. Also, there's no spill regardless. That was always explained above. I'll do a few deficits here. First, process is key. Rush impact is immediate. Coleman evidence says that regulatory uncertainty makes it impossible for effective policy to occur because investors don't know what to do with. Framing issues that they see that only in the world of the plan can we solve 50 pipelines immediately, not true in their world because people won't be willing to invest. And because of the process takes time, devolution takes time, new state regulatory regimes take time. These are all things that make it ineffective at large. Also, they conceded that you cannot build more pipelines in the world of the counterplan. Conceded the eminent domain stuff. Federal eminent domain is what allows pipelines to be built. They are not water policy, but rather federal land that federal government seizes for the purpose of the pipelines. Meaning that even if they devolve water policy writ large, they still cannot literally build pipelines in the world, and they can't stop oil exports. But they've also dropped uncertainty for investment where large common evidence statistic people don't know the process. There's legal ambiguity. People wouldn't be willing to invest in a 50 different fractured regulatory frameworks that have never occurred after the Supreme Court makes an unprecedented decision. Can't solve the F.
423. Everybody here? I'm just waiting for Josh and Tyler. Okay. Okay. The order is devolution counterplan, advantage counterplan, advantage 1. Is everybody good? Okay, great. The 1AR makes a big strategic mistake when they do not extend a permutation or answer to an internal net benefit. They have let us fiat in a dissent that they conceded, which means any risk of case defense means we will spill over. We do not have to solve any of the case because the internal net benefit has gone conceded and they do not get a permutation to run the two together, which means no 2AR new answers. It's fine. 8 limbs, outrounds of the COCs. We do not lose because the 1AR did not realize a way we could have extended this kind of plan. Now that outweighs. First is in the 1C Meheka's evidence. It says that federalism solves broader federalist survival solves all extinction, even if they went limited to one area. It's tried or negative because they can see that there's a host of conflicting factors that are unable to solve. Now the Weiss 22 evidence from the 1R says it probably solves innovation because it allows for innovation, things like resource scarcity, etc., all of which go existential absence of innovation. There's also the ORTS evidence. If you want a card that's very explicit for extinction, the ORTS evidence gives you that. Says there'll be a large scale wars between countries like Russia and the US or China and the US, which turn any scenario they have because it's about authoritarianism, not a scenario of fiscal, etc. Improves if they win those wars. The way we turn case, either we turn case for any impact that goes to, but it's also external because it says countries like Iran and North Korea who develop new technology, etc. Only federalism can solve this. It's try or die negative because they know that absent a revival, we are doomed to extinction. So we have not solved. Now the spillover stuff is the only chance of winning. They have not applied it to the internal net benefit, and the 2AR does not get you spin it in any way that they explain by spillover means we do not solve the AF, but have not explained what means we do not solve the internal, and no evidence says we must spillover broadly to solve the internal. Either way, we're just winning this debate. First is that they've considered we fiat all of water protection is devolved. We do not fiat just one area, but water broadly, which means any deficit they make. Because you does not assume the fact they've assumed a kind of where we fiat only this getting involved, which is not that. Second, we have cards and they do not. The Casman evidence, which when considered says we limit anti-common the counterplan, which can only be done via a limit on the anti-commandeering doctrine, which necessarily spills over. There's no other explanation they've given for how the counterplan could be justified in court, which means necessarily it must impact anti-commandeering, and that necessarily spills over. But third is they say they're like, oh, we said no spillover on cross-sex. Yes, they said no spillover on one end because they're only energy, but we have made separate spillover claims. We did not concede theirs to get spillover, so them saying they did not make spillover does not matter in any way, shape, or form. Now the certainty deficits, again, I don't have to win any of these, but the counterplan was certain and immediate, which means no sense. It's only a signaling deficit about certainty, but they can see the Murray evidence, which says it solves certainty net better. The process of federalism devolved mean there's the status quo is a state of mass uncertainty. Solving one area of veto permits does not mean they solve other non-water protections on pipe, or does not mean they solve any other environmental uncertainty, etc. All of which turn the LNG industry. Our evidence is the only way for industries to have a certain operating field is that there's one level, and that is only possible by devolving to the states. Self-authority doesn't solve, and having the status quo is not worse. The AF just makes that worse by taking authority away from the states without eliminating the state levels. Think about post-AF, the states could still veto, just they think it's less likely because they say that the Fed would also consider, but that does not mean they take away the state's veto after the state's veto power. Now, the big framing issue here is they read in evidence that more layers of review is bad. That's a Tweedy-Coleman evidence, and we conceded that the status quo is multiple layers. The plan is multiple layers because of what I said above. They do not remove state veto authority. They just think states will not veto. We remove the multiple layers, which means we saw that the Coleman evidence that they have read says that that is specifically key to solve certainty, which means they have read some of the evidence for us. Now, the federal land thing, it's so new. The warrant in the 2AC was the Coleman card, and then us just saying that it's not all environmental law, or them saying it's not all environmental law. Either way, federal lands would still get devolved because it's water protection broadly, which means any lands that the water is, you should not give the 2AR any explanation. You should strike this from your throat because there's not in the 2AC or the 2AC. Our block strategies are premise on what they do or not say. Either way, one, winning spillover means we win because we've won. We spill over to those federal lands. Two, there's no reason that the FERC would still lose their authority over the counterplan, over all LNG stuff in the would lose over all LNG stuff. So even if they have the land, that does not mean the FERC could do anything about it. And spillover. And so third is the counterplan is more streamlined. We are one actor. There's no reason the Fed must be the one doing that actor. We've turned Coleman that was above uncertainty does not make any sense because the counterplan is most certain and immediate because it's fiat, and maybe courts are uncertain, but the ruling would be so crystal clear that the countries would be like, okay, I don't really know why the court did this, but I know the court did this on the status quo. They're unsure who has power or what. Advantage counterplan. Heard my point for it. Now, because this could end up being essentially a disadverse case debate, I will do case mitigation here. One is Turn's case on the ORTS evidence, means I don't have to win any of this, but it's just to make this a little easier for us to win. First is the China scenario. Now, this explanation makes no sense. They say that economic interdependence does not solve, but for some reason, LNG interdependence would solve. Can someone please reconcile those two arguments for me? The explanation they said for why LNG solves is they would not want to go to war with someone who's supplying them oil, but then or LNG, but they say it's someone who's supplying their entire economic growth. They would go to war with, makes 0 sense, improves the times and evidence that it solves. Either way, they dropped other warrants. Things like MAD means that the US and China
would never go to war because they know there'd be nuclear misconduct. Does not apply for our worst scenario because we said countries like Iran and North Korea, which do not guarantee, which have nuclear stockpiles, so the United States would not perceive MED, but it does apply to their impact and takes that out. It also obviously doesn't apply to innovation. They try to concede it. They also, the one see Thompson evidence specifically says no, you're trying to war because the leaders know there's no constitution for conflict. I mean, Xi and others and Biden both think they'd be more unpopular with it, so there's no way the risk lash out. There's no risk of miscalculation because the only scenario makes absolutely no sense when they say interference does not solve, but also does solve. But also consider that none in the context of Taiwan, which answered SCS. Now the Russia stuff, I'm just going to go with the impact defense here. They've conceded the Jurassic evidence, or they have not conceded. Sorry, the Jurassic evidence says that NATO will not get drawn in now. They say we've only read one card, but our evidence is just better than theirs. One is that the only scenario where Putin lets out is it goes down, but the Jurassic evidence says NATO and in the status quo, NATO and Putin have no incentive to go to war. Putin knows that he will lose all power if he tries to strike NATO, and NATO knows that they do not want to get drawn in. The fact that Biden is being so true, not even doing no-fly zones or anything, proves that they would never try to escalate even post-plan because they know that they cannot risk being drawn in. I know that the deficits may seem true. It does not matter. One, because they're not contextualized to the Ken plan, but two, because it's disad versus case with a chance of us solving.
Cool. We have 420. We'll start it now.
Okay. It's advantage 1, then devolution. Everyone good? Yeah. Okay. This is an easy affirmative bow. We have defense to the thesis of the internal benefit. The biggest impact of the trial means short term. It means on a short time frame is sufficient to justify an out European gas tax were critical to Russia's Ukraine war chest. That allows Putin to escalate the war in Ukraine and advance his focus to resupply. That causes Putin to believe that a NATO intervention in Ukraine is inevitable, which causes him to attempt to destabilize and distract NATO through attacks on places like Latvia. Activates Article 5 that goes nuclear to Russian aggression. The only defense they extend here is that NATO and Russia have no intention of intervening in MAD. That simply does not assume or scenario. When Putin gets ahead in Ukraine, he'll view it as inevitable that NATO intervenes in order to defend the Kiev government, even if he knows it'll be disaster. He'll try to mitigate that by doing something like a gray zone operation in the Baltic, trying to seize Russian enclaves there. Once Putin attacks NATO country, that obviously activates Article 5, causing countries like Poland and the Baltics to hate Russia, to drag in the US, and they've not contested that once Russia and NATO are at war, it goes nuclear, results in extinction. That's just that way. One time frame. Their innovation impacts are inherently less probable and less important because there's always risk that intervening actors or someone else intervenes to solve an innovation, especially because their impacts are only about US innovation. Secondly, these magnitude only be a scenario for nuclear escalation between Russia and the US and a resource war in the Arctic or whatever. Even their quote unquote best card for extinction in the 2 hours card that said that Russia and the United States would fight a war, not anything regarding nuclear weapons or anything regarding a direct attack on NATO countries. Something like an Arctic resource war wouldn't have a scenario to go nuclear because there are like civilians in the Arctic or Article 5 commitments in the Arctic. Framing issue and second is the long-term scenario. Framing issue that we can see a structural war that Putin has a long-term desire to go to war with the West. The fixed evidence is the second Russia scenario and includes that Russian eventualism is structurally inevitable. This is an impact rather than one seen extended in every speech. They've read zero defense. They've read everything saying NATO isn't involved in the Ukraine war, but they're not contested in the long term that motorization of the Russian state will result in them invading the Baltics and EU if the EU was still dependent on Russia. No, these pair of impacts are the quickest evidence in the round. The internal benefit of the devolution counter plan is obviously garbage. They offer a fiat DA defense to it, but they've also done zero impact calculus. They also done zero impact calculus, which they don't get neither. Like again, the war occurs immediately, or they can see that's at least inevitable, which means that any defense we do on the internal benefit level, especially because it's only about U.S. innovation, means that it's try or die affirmative. Yeah, let me try and massively outweighs the world government. The estimate is 100% risk of long-term invasion of the EU. They've conceded that once war happens, it goes nuclear. The counter plan. They frame this as a deal that's gone conceded, but they've done no impact calculus. That's why the impact outweighs, and the deal was just factually not conceded. We did extend trolling defense. We refuted the premise that suppose our broader cooperation. The 1 and C innovation evidence says innovation is good for broad things like pro of climate change, etc. It says that federalism writ large is key to solve this, which water federalism does not do. How on earth does a ruling that says states have like an inherent right to control their water somehow solve nuclear proliferation or climate change? We consistently reject this premise and now contextualize it. They say that it must be in regards to non-delegation. Okay, it's about non-delegation, but how does non-delegation actually spill over to solving things like worldwide nuclear or climate change, especially when I'm pretty sure we've even conceded defense to climate change. When we conceded defense to climate change, this is occurring in 1 year. We said there's no spillover in the planet is not key. They dropped the first half of that. They claim extinction is inevitable in the world of the counterplan. Nothing says this. The impact at best is that is it good to cap extinction threats, but long-term, not consensual, and doesn't say it necessarily works. Even if you think the defense is great, it should be more than enough if we win the counterplan. Doesn't solve the F. The 1 year clearly said the federalism is distinct from the impacts. So you at the end of this debate, if you can't look us in the eye and explain how states having control for water will result in states solving like nuclear prolif, states solving climate change, states solving like I don't know rogue AI or whatever. It just doesn't happen. The deficits. There's no chance of capital solves the affirmative. There are way too many deficits here. First is eminent domain. It was not new. I clearly said this in the 2AC. We've extended it throughout every speech. Giving states control over water does not give them control over lands. They counterplan Texas, limited water federalism. They have no evidence that even exposed over to all water federalism or even like state control of their lands writ large. They even see that only the federal government has the power to seize eminent domain for the purposes of pipelines. It's not like a specific pipeline power too. It's not like a water related power, which is not fiat devolution to the states how to do it. There's no six-minute states getting water access with something allowed them to seize federal lands, which means there's no way that pipelines can actually built in the world of the counterplan because they can see that eminent domain is like key to building pipelines. That hasn't been like contested throughout this debate. Second is certainty. Uncertainty about the process of counterplan's method results in investor ambiguity. Even if the counterplan results in confirming the plan, there's massive amounts of uncertainty when add the process to regulation. The only response to this is they somehow solve certainty by fiating the counterplan is certain and immediate. Yeah, you can fiat it, but obviously no one knows about fiat in this hypothetical world. It's not time thesis. How the world does the industry feel comfortable when investing in a system when the Supreme Court made a massively unprecedented decision and then they devolved it to an entirely new authority? The decision can be crystal clear, but there's obviously still going to be massive uncertainty because it's just entirely new decision. They've also dropped a second warrant for this. Every one of the 50 states has different schemes. How do you vote to have from Texas to California? Where literally every state in between has different schemes, and you can consider. They say they're alpha. They say they're alpha also links to this because we allow state vetoes. We consider water pollution standard. We consider water pollution standards for pipelines, which probably means pipelines that go through rivers and stuff, which is only a few states. We've given as a cultural export states like California and liberal states in the east. Not every single state on the routes of pipelines from oil processing facilities to the sea. And like just the two ways to ultimately claim there's investment key long-term Russian confidence in inevitable absent U.S. investment results in ramped up production. Again, they don't have an argument that they're going to increase that investment. So, like, bottom line, they've conceded that U.S.-Russia war is inevitable absent the plan. They've not won the claim that absent like specific U.S. state innovation, extinction is inevitable. Their best impact card doesn't go anywhere close to there, so you have to give it F. Good debate.
Deal.
Nice try, Neil. We'll get card deck.
We'll make a card deck now.
Neg deck is set.
Oh yeah, AFCAR doc's been sent.
Hello, hello. Yep. Okay. Next.
Okay, I just voted and I was the last one. Okay, we have everybody. Congrats to both teams for reaching the quarterfinals of the Tournament of Champions. I thought this was an awesome debate. It was extremely close. The decision was unanimous for the neg from Walter Payton. I can talk first, but I don't have to if any of the other judges would like to go. Okay, so I rarely have no idea who I'm going to vote for when I enter the decision, and I really had no idea this time. Like I thought after the 2NR, like, okay, the neg is like really ahead. Like I don't know how the AF comes back. And then I thought the 2AR did like just about everything that I think you could reasonably do. And I just, so it was razor close. I think the Russia impact is large. The federalism impact also large. And the reason that I voted neg is that I think that the counter plan solves enough of the AF that it's not zero, you know, like it's not unmitigated Russia war against unmitigated federalism, which I think if it were, then I think the 2AR's impact comparison would be correct. It would be short-term, try or die, etc. But so the eminent domain thing probably gave me the most pause. I wish it were supported by evidence. I get it. You know, like it's not new in the 1AR. It's a sentence in the 2AC that's not connected to a warrant. So I don't think that the 2NR arguments are particularly new about it either, right? But like if it were more developed in the 2AC, if it were connected to a 1AC card, then I would think that the 2NR arguments were entirely new. But, you know, like the neg does have generally suggestive spillover evidence that, you know, that the counter plan causes assertions of state power broadly. Maybe that means that eminent domain stuff gets figured out in a similar way. The thing that I thought that I wish the neg had said was just like this doesn't matter because however pipelines get built, the federal government would still approve or take land and build pipelines, even if the states are the ones in the driver's seat of water protection, which was just like the obvious kind of intuitive response. And the thing that I think the AF really should have done is keep the federalism advantage alive in the 1AR, because if you could kind of just say like, hey, the AF solves some degree of federalism, we solve some amount of this net benefit, even if the AF is not as radically pro-state power as the counterplan, I think I would have thought that the degree to which the AF solved federalism and access to the neg impact was more than the degree to which the counterplan solved LNG exports and access the AF impact. But absent that, yeah, that's, I don't want to belabor the point. I'll let the other judges talk. But, you know, Gunn, I thought you all debated awesome. You should be incredibly proud. I believe you both are seniors. I'm not sure of that. I know at least one of you is, because I know you're going to Emory, which is disgusting, but whatever. good luck in college debate.
Thank you.
Yeah, I can go next. Yeah, echo everything Bun said. I think this was a fantastic debate, super close. Very impressed by everyone. Congrats on a great season and for making it this far at the TOC. So I voted negative. The short of it is I think the federalism net benefit outweighs the eminent domain uncertainty deficits to the counterplan. So I agree with Bun that, like, just in the abstract, if this were just a DA case debate, I think the AF is controlling the general direction of impact offense and framing. I don't think there's a ton of contestation to the Russia scenario on the 2NR other than this extension of impact defense that's like nobody will escalate. I think your defense is fine on the NATO side of the conflict, but I think the AF is controlling the claim that Putin will lash out regionally when he's built a war chest, produces the escalatory dynamics there. Ev says risk miscalc. So I think there's a rather high risk of Russia war, and I don't think the neg is a great spot if the counterplan were to be jettisoned. So then I evaluated the internal net benefits debate. I'm with the 2AR in theory on the net benefit, with this counterplan obviously being kind of contrived. I think the problem is the specific contestation of why federalism broadly isn't key to avert extinction through pro-lift, democracy promotion, etc., is not really present until the 2AR. I think the 2AC makes a very brief argument about all causes to federalism. The 1AR extrapolates this to establish that water federalism doesn't spill over to federalism broadly, which I grant the 2AR. But I think the neg is also correct that it's try or die for some change to the US federalist model. And more importantly, I think the neg is winning two decent arguments that establish a risk that the model established by the counterplan is capable of promoting federalist innovation writ large. One is this precedent-based argument about the counterplan modifying judicial interpretations of the anti-commandeering doctrine to shape future federalism cases. It can make some sense. Judiciary would reference a landmark decision like the counterplan in deciding future litigation that's somewhat established by the 2NC Casman card. And then this card that they have that's like environmental federalism is the testing ground or the historical genesis of changes to the overall state federal balance of power. This Robbins card they read is surprisingly specific on the Clean Water Act constituting a battlefield for overall federalism theory. And the 2NR makes this argument that the counterplan devolves water protection authority broadly, not just over the plan. So I think they do get access to these arguments about how the CWA and altering interpretations of that and devolving authority over that can be used as a basis for federalism's evolution. So I think there's a decently sized risk of the net benefit to the counterplan as well, despite this internal link defense, which ended up filtering how I evaluated the deficits. I don't think the neg needs to establish an overwhelming risk. The counterplan is equally as certain as the AF, but merely enough to foster industry investment in new pipelines that would increase LNG exports and decrease the risk of a conflict with Russia. I think the biggest cut to the deficit is the reasons the plan would be certain and foster industry confidence. So clarifying the role of state regulations in the LNG pipeline approval process seemed to me would also apply to the counterplan. So the 2NR concedes this Coleman evidence that 2AC reads, and I think is controlling the spin on it. So even if the legal process of the counterplan is initially unprecedented, I think the neg is winning an argument that both over the medium and the long term, having a single layer of approval for LNG projects and having that all adjudicated on the state level is far more likely to engender industry certainty and promote new LNG projects. Eminent domain stuff kind of evaluated the same way as Button. I think it just needed more evidentiary grounding or application, more warrants in the 2AC or being tied to a 1AC card. Just couldn't really make the connection for the neg. And then this like states will impose non-uniform standards articulation of the certainty deficit, which seems to me that it would also apply to the AF to some extent. And I'm not sure why the regulations promulgated by the counterplan would be necessarily non-uniform. So ultimately, decent size risks, both sides offense. I think the risk the counterplan solves the case is greater than the AF cuts to the net benefit.
Yeah, I would agree. I was just going to comment the complexity, because the complexity solvency deficit that hadn't been addressed yet. And yeah, I thought that it was as plausible that the counterplan resolved it because of the taking the federal government out in terms of a layer, the kind of the 2NR argument that I thought the 2AR could have more directly addressed. And I agree with Jeff. Like, I thought that aspects of the 2AR were really good. Made the debate incredibly close, but I think that kind of made the certainty question as applicable to y'all as it did to the counterplan. The eminent domain thing, like I thought about it the same way as Jeff. I guess I also took the 2NR response about FERC being the only impediment now, and that not being applied anymore. and then just rationally kind of from cross-X, your continual assertion that the pipelines were ready to go, and it was just this, just this like legal snafu in the way between the federal government and the states that would allow it to do it. So ultimately, I decide very little in terms of solvency deficit. I also think Russia war would be much quicker and larger impact if I'm just comparing the two. But ultimately, I think that the counterplan resolves enough of that to make kind of the vague laundry list of potentially harmful but maybe not extinction arguments relevant. Also determined, like Tyler, all in the exact same way that about the spillover. I think that the neg just spent a lot more time here, and the 1AR was kind of just like, there's no spillover. I believe the line was like, this is a joke. There's no spillover. And obviously the block had done much more in order to develop those credible internal links. Solved more of the AF and made the bigger impact the more attractive option. So great job to everybody.
I'm gonna hop off to get something to eat, but great round, y'all. Thanks for joining, everyone.
Yeah,
Great
good
season.
luck,
Always fun to debate.
always
Good
good
luck with the
debate,
rest of the
y'all.
round.
Good luck
Thank you.
Sure. Okay, I had one question, I guess, just for all of y'all. I guess for the Russia turn in the 1AR, did y'all think the coverage in there was sufficient? Because we did not have a block to that.
Yeah, I think so. I thought I was kind of surprised by how much clock time there was on it in the 1AR. I didn't really think about it, so I don't have a very specific piece of advice, but I thought you could have said the things that you said could have been said as effectively in slightly less time to give you more devolution time. But I thought you were doing okay there. I don't really read cards during the debate. Maybe I should, but it just seemed from 2AC to neg block that you all were behind on that. But then when I read your cards just for evaluating the case impact, I was really surprised by how good they were. So I think that you would have been okay on the Russia turn had they gone for it, given the evidence in the 1AC and the 1AR debating.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. I thought listening perceptually, I was like, oh, this is going to be the 2NR, but I think there was a reason he chose the devolution counterplot. I think y'all's evidence was better. One of the things that I thought of is maybe be a little bit more focused on Putin's overall motivations. If you can control that, then you can control the direction of either if he lashes out from desperation or whether he's more measured, kind of speaks to his motivation overall, head, where his head's at, basically.
Yeah, I don't have really anything to add. I think 1AR seemed sufficient on the Russia turn. I think you probably were ahead on just the general claim that impact uniqueness for this is kind of iffy given the 1AC scenarios. Don't really think there's a ton to add other than just maybe additional cards if you have time on motivations or internal link to the turn.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you. I'm going to take a nap now, but thank y'all for the feedback.